Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Siti Anissa Achari Pulungan. I'm from class A3, and now I want to tell about my oral summary, chapter 4. The title is The Psychology of Second Language Acquisition. Now, let's restart. A. Language and the brain. Notions that particular locations in the brain may be specialized for language functions that back at last into the 19th century. Paul Pierre Broca at 1861 for 1865 observed that an area in the left frontal lobe, Broca's area, appeared to be responsible for the ability to speak, and note that an injury to the left side of the brain was much more likely to result in language loss than was an injury to the right side. B. Learning process. Psychology provides us with three major frameworks from the focus on learning process. 1. Information processing, or IP. Approaches based on IP are concerned with the mental process involved in language learning and use. Number 2. Theories regarding order of acquisition. Psychological approaches to SLA have made significant contribution to understanding why certain elements are accurate in a fixed sequence. This model includes the following claims. Number 1, learners acquire certain grammatical structures in a development sequence, and then number 2, developmental sequence reflect how learners overcome processing limitations, and then language interactions which target developmental future will be successful only if learners have already mastered the processing operation which are associated with the previous stage of acquisition. Number 3, composition model. Another psychological approach. Number 3, composition model. Another psychological approach that has addresses the general question of how language and learned is the composition model, or Bates and McSweeney 1981, and then McSweeney 2001. This is a functional approach which assumes that all linguistic performance involves mapping between external from the internal functions. And then number 4, connections approaches to learning have much in common with IP perspectives, but they focus on the increasing strengths of associations between stimuli and responses rather than on the inferred aberrations of rules, or on restructuring. C. Complexity theory. A basic concept in complexity theory as it applies to SLA is that all language and varieties of language are complex systems with interconnected components and stage of learner language. Saying that a complex system has interconnected components mean that levels of language like phonology, vocabulary, and discourse are interdependent in their development. The differences in learners. Number 1 is it is a common belief that children are more successful L2 learners than adults. But the evidence for this is actually surprisingly equivocal. One reason for the apparent inconsistency in research finding is that some studies define relative success as initial rate of learning, where contrary to popular belief, older learners have an advantage, while other studies define it as ultimate achievement, where learners who are introduced to the L2 in childhood indeed do appear to have an edge. Also, some studies define success in terms of how close the learner's pronunciation is to a native speaker's. Others in terms of how closely a learner approximates native grammatically judgments, and still others in terms of fluency or functional competence. Next, sex. Most research on the relation of learner sex and SLA has been concerned with cognitive style or learning strategies, or to issues of what variety of L2 is being accurate or opportunities for input and instructions. There do appear to be some sex difference in language acquisition and processing, but the research evidence is mixed. For example, women outperform men in some tests of verbal fluency, such as many words that begin with a certain letter. Next, aptitude. The assumption that there is a talent which is specific to language learning has been widely held for many years. The following four components were proposed by Carroll in 1965 as underlying this talent, and they constitute the basis of most aptitude tests. Number 1, phonemic coding ability. 2, inductive language learning ability. And then grammatical sensitivity. And last, associative memory capacity. And next, motivation. Motivation is variously defined, but it is usually conceived as the construct which includes at least the following component. See Oxford and Ehrman at 1996, 1993, Dorney at 2001. Number 1, significant goal or need. Then desire to attain the goal. And then perceptions that learning L2 is relevant to fulfilling the goal or meeting the need. And then believe in the likely success for fulfilling of learning too. And the last, fully of potential outcomes or rewards. Next, cognitive style. Cognitive style refers to individuals' preferred way of processing. Example of perceiving, conceptualizing, organizing, and recalling information. Unlike factors of age, aptitude, and motivation, its role in explaining why some L2 learners are more successful than others has not been well established. But extravagant claims have sometimes been made which need to be viewed with skepticism and caution. And then personality. Personality factors are sometimes added to cognitive style in characterizing more general learning style. Speculation and research in SLA, including the following factors, also often characterized as endpoint on continua. As a cognitive style, most of us are somewhere in between the extremes. Boldface print in this figure indicates positive correlations with success in L2 learning. Learning strategies. Major traits, Ellis at 2008 for 68. Number 1, concern for language form, but also attention to meaning. Number 2, concern for communication. Number 3, active text approach. Number 4, awareness of learning process. And the last, capacity to use strategies flexibly in accordance with text requirements. Effect of multilingualism. Philosophical the notion that multilingualism has positive effects on cognitive development was traditionally related to the belief that foreign language study, especially Greek and Latin, is good for training the mind. There is still an assumption in many parts of the world that multilingualism is an essential characteristic of educated and cultured members of society. Okay, that's all my oral summary from the psychological of second language acquisition. Thank you for watching and see you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.